Blake Baker is the defensive coordinator at Missouri. By the way, just signed an extension at Missouri. Was a defensive coordinator at Miami, then was a linebackers coach at LSU. Kind of grew a mythical being to himself because of guys like DeLeone Clark, who's now starting with the Cowboys, went from looking like being a guy that was on this past LSU defense to someone who would have been a first-round pick if he didn't fracture his neck. Goes to Missouri. Joe, look at Missouri defensively this year. Like, look at them. They're monsters, okay? Blake is a guy that played at Tulane. People here love him. Now, let me just tell you something. It was reported by LSU people that LSU did not have the money to go spend to fire their entire defensive staff and go and buy someone out and bring somebody home. That is the biggest lie on the face of the planet. Okay? With all of that being said, what are your thoughts on him being the leading target as of right now? Now, if you're watching this video when it's clipped, he could be hired or you know, a lot of things can happen. A lot of things change in sourcing. But your thoughts?
I think it's really interesting with the timing of him getting the extension. And look, as a fan of a team that was just actively pursuing a Missouri coordinator, and they immediately blocked him up to keep him from leaving, I'm holding my breath a little bit. But as you're talking about, he's got ties to the region, which is massive. Just purely from a coaching standpoint, what he would bring to LSU. First of all, I was pretty surprised that they ended up moving on this quickly from Matt House. It seemed like that they were going to give him a second chance, but that does not end up coming to fruition. What Baker has done at Missouri, taking an athletic group of guys that were mid to lower level recruits in the SEC and to turn them into weapons, I think is a tremendous accomplishment. I can't even imagine what he'd be able to do with the arsenal of dudes that he could bring in and have at LSU. That to me is what's really that's what I love about defensive coordinator hires like this, that when you go and get a guy who coaches at a lower level Power 5 team and produces massive results, because the minute you give him real talent, you know, the ceiling is tremendously high.
I know exactly what he can do. I've literally seen it. Like, if you're an LSU fan, Joe, you've seen it with a guy like DeLeone Clark. Now, the question becomes, okay, you had a guy that was here. Now, BK's gonna take some heat from this because he let the guy go, right? Like, you had the guy in-house, you let him go when you were hired. I get it. You're on a team that's 6-6. He goes and gets the head or DC job at Missouri. Had really good year this year. But I agree with you. We've seen it. And here's the thing. He will recruit. And he's got a stable of dudes that are coming in here. Gonna have to give him some time, okay, if he comes to LSU to rebuild some things. But Blake Baker would be one hell of a hire if it does emerge that he's the dude. But speaking on that, too, just in case people didn't miss it, LSU fires their entire defensive staff besides Bob Diaco, who's a former Notre Dame DC. John Jancic, who I do think will have a role in this on this team. I don't think maybe he will be an analyst. Maybe he does coach a position. We'll see on that. But, Joe, your thoughts. You know Brian Kelly more than most people do. He's done this before at Notre Dame, but when it started going off today that Brian Kelly was like, look, man, see ya. What'd you think about that?
Biggest thing, knowing Brian Kelly, and I was talking with somebody who – also a Notre Dame fan, was making these comments before they made the firing. Brian Kelly has notoriously waited way too long to fire some of his assistants. I watched him do it at Notre Dame, and that was what, you know, at one time led to one of their worst seasons in his time when he was the head coach at Notre Dame. I really didn't think that they were going to fire Matt House, because I was so used to him letting the leash run way too long with these guys that clearly are not going to get the job done. But not only does he fire House, he fires the whole coaching staff. That to me is a huge step forward for Brian Kelly. That is something that I have never seen him do, and that I thought was pretty unexpected. I think they should go after Brian Van Gorder, though. I think that would be a
shut your mouth. But ironically, Brian Kelly did bring that up, talking about Van Gorder was in his wedding and fired him mid-season. Like, he brought up to him in the context of, have you ever fired a coach mid-season? He goes, I fired a guy that was in my wedding 3 games into a season. Like, and so look, here's the thing, Joe, and I know you're going to get mad at this. I don't know if Brian Kelly was given the leash like he was at Notre Dame, like he's given at LSU. Like LSU's not going to bat an eye at a $5.4 million buyout on anybody. They're not going to blink. Like you can't blink in the SEC. I know that you're at Notre Dame, okay, but Joe, I love you to death. There's a difference of playing Louisville every year or playing even Clemson or having a schedule like LSU has had in the past where in a month span they're playing Georgia and Alabama. Oh, and by the way, throw in Ole Miss. They're not going to blink about firing a dude. Now, I know you're probably going to take what I just said out of context. What I'm saying is he can't allow that to happen here.
I don't really totally agree with the part of the statement that he had there. I don't think that those two things are related. I get what you're saying. But I don't think that his past at Notre Dame and him holding on to guys too long has any relation to
buyouts don't come into a play here, because I saw with your old administration that you wouldn't go pay out a dude and Andy Ludwig at Utah to come to Notre Dame.
Well, they just okay.
I
understand what you're saying, but hold
on about Mike Denbrock's contract. He didn't sign it. The buyout was less than $1 million for you to come and get Mike Denbrock versus it was $2 million.
I did hear about some of the complications with his contract, and didn't you guys just get a new governor too that kind of shook things up a little bit with that? Or
no, that's all a lie. I've been hearing it. It's all a lie. None of that happened.
Okay, right. But I don't think that those two things are related, though. I think that Brian Kelly has had an issue holding on to guys too long, and I think that this was trending towards that. Like, let me ask you this: Did they decide to fire Matt House after the bowl game? Was that predetermined, or because they played such a shitty game in the bowl game, it was the nail in the coffin
all year?
I know they did, but do you think that the bowl game was the nail in the coffin? That he was like, you know what, we're not doing this.
No, I don't, because I don't think you go after a bowl game and fire him.
I don't like the timing though, because they're doing it after all these other moves have happened with coordinators.
Well, not if your number one guy was Blake Baker. If your number one guy,
but now you got to get him to leave after he signed an extension.
Again, they're not going to blink. Like, this is another day. This is Joe.
I know, but it just seems really poor timing.
It's not poor timing at all.
It's after multiple top guys have gotten extensions.
He goes through signing day at the end of the year. He fires him. And here's another thing too. Okay, he's already had to shake up his coaching staff on the defensive side this year because the position coach went down. Had a stroke type of thing at practice, and he's already had to pull up analysts. He probably doesn't have a lot of on-field analysts at that current moment. I mean, they had to bring in Pete Jenkins' his old ass, for crying out loud. I just look. I think it's a good move, and if Blake Baker's the guy, look, maybe they already had the finances. Who knows? But it's not a bowl game thing. I'm telling you, it's not a bowl game thing, because they didn't. Okay. They actually played better in the bowl game.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.